Welcome, and of course, good morning to everyone. Today, we are going to take a closer look at tourism, but not just tourism. The idea is to continue with the United Nations system. Remember, we already covered in previous classes that the United Nations has a system of specialized agencies, okay? And we already know some of them, okay? Not maybe all of them, because they are a lot, but of course, the idea is to cover by, remember, two classification. We can classify according the kind of or type of organization it is or agency. And the other classification we cover is about the theme, the topic, the mandate. Okay? So if we speak about UNESCO, okay, we cover education. If we speak about UNICEF, we cover childhood. If we cover according to different organization, we are going to cover different topics. And according to that, we are going to cover in the further classes the different mandates, direct mandates. In this case is tourism. Okay? Tourism, we tend to connect with economic affairs, with commerce, with services sector, but also is related to the United Nations and global governance. Okay, so to incorporate this view, this perspective, we are going to get a general idea about the topic, but especially bringing it into the line with the topic of international relations. That is our perspective, and especially in the organization of the United Systems. Okay, United Nations system. Important, we are going to cover some international standards, the concept, very important, and some aspect about the rights, okay, at international level. About the introduction, okay, about the way to cover this topic. There's a lot of aspects, a lot of phase in the prism. So in this case, we are going to begin with to define and to compare, okay, to get the meaning of the concept of tourism, especially comparing with our prior and general knowledge. Because of course, if I ask you, to all of you, you have a general knowledge, an idea what is tourism. Okay, we can get different perspective and different ways to cover the topic. Okay, but today more especially we are going to bear in mind, okay, that this is a direct mandate. Okay, it's a compulsory objective or goal proposal that is regulated not only in a specific UN organization, even and especially in the general rules of the public international law. Okay, so we have norms and regulations according to this, and because of that, we are going to cover the perspective of a right, okay, in an international way, okay, international law. So according to what I'm mentioning, it's important to consider that it's not only one UN agency cover the topic. One has the direct mandate, but we have, of course, what we already covered, the concept of interagency work. Because if we want, for example, to cover the health or to cover the economic aspects or the development or different mandates, in some points, some corners, some aspects are connected or interconnected with other agencies' work. So to don't overlap, they have to coordinate. Okay? For example, the World Health Organization is going to coordinate with environment organization. Why? Because environment is connected to have a good environment, has a good, a proper surrounding, sustainable development, and that is connected with development, with health, okay, to live in a proper way, to have a good living conditions. So in that kind of situations, we have what is interconnected or interdependent and inter organized, okay, agency work. So it's not only one organization, we have different programs, activities connected to the topic of tourism, and we are going to cover that. It's important to consider and to take into account that tourism is diverse, but certainly is a factor with a high impact in the international relations. This is not a secondary topic. This is not, okay, tourism, to travel, or that general idea. No, this is quite important and impacting a lot of fields in a lot of areas, okay? Rights connected to areas from rights, okay, from things that we have to develop to have in our life, and also economic growth, okay, the degree of exposure of the topic in the different regions, in the different countries, okay, this is very important, and because of that tend to be in the agenda, tend to be in the political campaign, in the government goals, as a very important topic. Of course, because economic aspect, but also about other aspects, okay, that we are going to incorporate. It's important to have these elements that I'm mentioning in a sort of transversal, diagonal way, okay, because it's interconnected. Why? Because this issue generates aspects that are typically international, quite connected to the global or international community environment. So tourism has an impact on international trade, on transport, diplomatic and consular relations, countries' foreign policies. Okay, it's not the same a country with a very hard or complicated connection or bad diplomatic relations. For example, you need visa. It doesn't matter if you are from one country or the other, always need a visa to visit, so you need to do paperwork. It's complicated to enter, it's not open, and it's completely different if you are an open, an international country that welcome to tourists, etc. So these perspectives are quite important, and to pursue that sort of a slogan, to be welcoming, to have a lot of infrastructure, a lot of opportunities to enjoy the country, the culture, the environment, the landscapes, etc. That is so connected to a lot of international relations aspects. For example, diplomatic relations, consular relations, trade. Okay, I have a tourist, and the tourist later wants to import or export, and later want to make some businesses. So is a way to show your country. Okay, of course, it's connected to countries' foreign policies, how we want to present to the world, and the degree of cooperation. If we have good diplomatic relations with other countries, is so much better to have international cooperation, to have alliances or allies. So that is very important in terms of how the sectors are so connected or interconnected with this concept or elements of tourism. Okay, so it's not just one person with a suitcase in an airport, it's much and many more aspects about it. Okay, given that the international community observes, recognizes, and protects, when I say tourism has a big impact, is an essential aspect or critical aspect about international relations and international community, it's very important to understand that the international law protects, observes, and recognizes this concept of tourism. Now we are going to develop the definition, the concept, and the scope of tourism, but it's very important in terms of specify that scope, nature, and dynamics that we are going to see in a protective vision, okay? Because it's the international law um, um, position or perspective. But first of all, the classical question: what is tourism, or what does tourism mean to you? That's hard. It's not hard actually. All of us has a notion. All of us has an idea, okay? For example, maybe we connect tourism with traveling, or we connect tourism with hotels, or staying in a different or accommodation, okay? To rent a house, to rent a car, services, okay? Quite important to connect with leisure, entertainment, okay? Recreation. We can connect with family, with friends to share a moment, free time, spare time, okay, among others ideas. These tend to be the general concepts. So think, okay, question yourself, ask yourself the idea, okay, what is tourism for me? Because now we are going to incorporate new perspective and new ideas that are part of the definition of tourism, especially in a global way, and quite important in terms of understanding public policies, international activities, international and global governance. Tourism, okay, more the classical idea or the classical definition, okay, a general definition of tourism is to understand tourism as the set of activities, okay, a group of activities that people engage in during their travel and stay in places, accommodation, other than their usual place of residence. Okay, so I live in one place, but I travel temporary to another place to different purposes. And in that period, certain period of time, has and implies tourism as a transitory nature. Of course, it's not to be 1 month, but for example, 3 months tend to be like the general idea for tourism, for general purposes. And because of that, we don't need visa for 90 days in a lot of the countries, okay? So it's a certain period, okay? Otherwise, you are leaving or you are moving out, another concept, but not tourism. And the concept of, I mean, the purposes, okay, the motivation about it, it could be leisure, okay, recreation, business, health, culture, cultural purposes, okay, among other reasons. It's important that understand tourism is a social, cultural, and economic phenomenon. Okay, so it's not just a business. It's not just okay a hotel, profits, and the general commercial view that we have of service idea. Involve more than just travel or transportation. Okay, of course, these connect with domestic and international tourism because we can make internal or national tourism and international tourism. And because of that, crossing borders, movement of money and a lot of aspects in economic, political, social, cultural way, that of course is a big and important topic of international relations. And because of that, United Nations has a specific approach about it. We must understand just a very, very brief overview about the history of tourism, okay? That we must understand that the origins of tourism are similar to tourism because we cannot completely call tourism can be found in the Asian travels, okay, for purposes of trade, exploration, pilgrimage, or even religion, okay? But the ancient times is not exactly the nowadays concept of tourism, okay, was more connected to these kind of purposes. For example, Egyptians, Greeks, or Romans has different aspects or different sorts of traveling that we can see some resemblance to tourism. In the modern age, okay, traveled throughout Europe by the upper classes, by nobility, okay, or crowns, tend to be more connected to that. Of course, this idea was connected with the development of transportation. So that's more the 19th century, when we have some incorporations like the railroad, the trains, the steamboat. Okay, so the transportation implements a time reduction to be able to cross with the Trans-Siberian, for example, to cross, or the Orient Express, to cross a continent, okay, to be able to incorporate, but it still was quite expensive, not affordable for everybody, okay, so it still maintains some aspect of upper class or very specific moment. Not everybody you can travel and not make tourism all the time, okay, to do this activity. But let the conception to modern tourism, okay? In the modern age, we got that idea of modern tourism. We are closer to nowadays idea, remain as a sort of luxury concept, but the mass tourism in the 20th and 21st centuries, we get more the development of the massive tourism, okay, for the masses, for everybody, emerged essentially and mainly after the Second World War, and certain this was connected, it was developed not just about transport, of course, but especially about rights. Okay, the development of the nowadays concept of tourism is quite connected with certain labor rights, such as the rest rights, okay, the right to rest, to have off job time, okay, and to enjoy that time. The concept of vacations or holidays, especially paid vacations. Later, we are going to make some comments about it. And of course, greater access to transportation, okay? Let's especially disconnect with the process, okay, that we are going to cover in further classes of globalization. Okay, in this case, globalization connected in a lot of aspects, globalization of markets, economy, etc., and especially globalization of tourism. Tourism is thus seen as a business, of course. We continue with the classical concept or the general idea of tourism, but implies some growing mechanism of economic growth, okay? A lot of countries were able to develop, to incorporate, to increase they monetary and commercial balance according to the third sector, the service sector, the tourism as a main and more important point in that sector. But this is, of course, a connection that tourism is a promotion and is so connected to the concept of trade. Okay, but it's important in this class to incorporate a new view. It's not removing, it's not putting aside, okay, this concept. This is the general concept, but we need to incorporate in an international relations, in an international view, a new aspect of tourism. Okay, this is an to add to the definition, which is tourism as a right. Okay, and this is less common. It's not new, important, but despite that, we don't tend to consider it as a right. Okay, it's okay if you can pay it, is something that you can decide, if you can afford it. Okay, we can get different concepts, but don't tend to cover it as a right. And it's important to consider it, and let's see why this is even regulated and in general rules and international law, public international law, tourism as a right. Okay, the most interesting aspect here in the international perspective is even overlook that tourism is a right, okay? Specifically, not just any right, it's a human right. Of course, we know that if it's human rights, each person, just for the fact of being, okay, of being a human, okay, a human being, has that right, okay, despite other aspects. So maybe we need to reconsider the industry of tourism, the development of tourism, okay, the way tourism is proposed right now, considering that to be able, accessible, affordable, to cover different needs and of course different people, okay? That is important. Later, we are going to consider the critiques and the other perspective over this view, but it's important that it's a human right. Okay, that was actually started with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948 that state that everyone has the right to rest, to leisure, and periodic paid vacations or paid holidays. Okay, why this is important? Because even nowadays we still have a lot of countries and a lot of labor rights that doesn't include paid vacations. Okay, you have the right to have vacations but not need to be paid. Okay, this is hopefully developing, okay, but it's important. Even in in some occasions in the job posting, for example, is okay, this is a good company because paid my vacation as a perk, as a benefit. Okay, that shouldn't be actually the situation because as a human right, as was recognized in 1948, vacations or holidays should be paid, are part of the rest, and that should be covered by the company. Okay, so this is a international perspective. Later, of course, when we enter in domestic or national rule of law, national legal and laws, that of course could change. Okay, but it's important to have this perspective. Okay, when we consider how we change a public policy, this is already regulated. Okay, which is complemented, of course, by the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights from the that was at 1966, okay, which guarantees the right of all persons or all people to enjoy fair and favorable working conditions. Okay, so the work environment should be favorable, should be enjoyable, should be pleasant, okay, should be um, uh, positive, okay, enriching, not just about the salary, not just about the payment, about to be a proper space, okay, and that's working condition, including the that's working condition including free time and paid vacation. Again, in 1966, we consider, and it's important, the regulation of paid vacations. Okay? In addition, the Convention on the Rights of the Child incorporates, of course, focus on that population, which is the child and teens. In 1989, incorporates an act, children have the right to rest, leisure, play, and participate in recreational activities. Of course, you can say, wait a minute, you didn't mention tourism. No, but we can, of course, interpret and connect. If I have the right to rest, if I have the right to have paid holidays, if I have the right to participate in recreational activities, that's quite connected to the concept of tourism. And to be more specific and connected with tourism and to connect this interpretation, we have the groundwork and the basis in the 1985, that is the Tourism Bill of Rights and the Tourist Code. Okay, That to recognize, here you have the literal disposition, but basically it integrates this right to rest, to leisure, and further provides that access to all persons, to all citizens, to all humans of the world, to one important aspect, which is discovery, the richness, okay, the universal concept of enjoying our, not just our country, our planet. Okay, it's important to connect. It's a very important priority, okay, to discover, to enjoy, to understand different cultures, languages, gastronomy, etc. Later, we are going to see why this is so much important and why it's a priority, but because it has a motivation, of course, but it's important that it's already regulated a lot of decades, okay? And it's important that this also should be bear into mind and should be bear into account by politicians, by lawmakers, okay, when we consider the situation of our specific countries. So the right to rest, also known as the right to leisure, includes tourism, okay, as an opportunity for people to broaden their horizons, to learn about other cultures, traditions, develop a greater understanding of diversity, of how is the world. Why this is important? Diversity, or especially understanding. Remember, one of the main and most important goals, mandates, and motivations of the United Nations and the global governance is the world peace and the safety of the world. Okay? To prevent conflicts, tensions, wars. And of course, if we have a better level of understanding among people, is actually is already studied and already corroborated as already researched, that better understanding, better intercultural knowledge provides better conditions to avoid conflicts, tensions, wars, threats, ultimatums, etc. So a bet tourism actually is a factor, a vector that impacts in the peace. Okay? And that way we connect the importance of the topic. Achieve personal and cultural growth. So again, when I am speaking about tourism as a right, I'm not that focused on economic aspects, on business, okay? That tend to be the main approach over tourism. So it's important to also connect with this, okay? Because tourism is a right and also has this perspective of these aspects incorporated. So likewise, in the 2030 agenda, which is the world proposal of the United Nations. So all the United Nations systems need to be coordinated according to the sustainable development goals, the different part of the 2030 agenda proposes tourism as a tool for promoting what? Peace and intercultural understanding, contributing to sustainable development. So, therefore, a central topic, a central theme is that as a human right, it implies social inclusion, since all people, regardless their origin, economic status, physical abilities, should have equal access to tourism opportunities. Okay, of course, it's not exactly the way tourism industry is right now in a lot of countries, even in the most touristic countries as a business sector, but it's important this exists, and the way that we propose, we reconsider, we can assess and evaluate in our analysis how should be or how could be or how to change and transform tourism. Okay, this is one aspect about the inputs that these classes are focused on, okay, to incorporate new perspective and new aspects already exist in your analysis. Let's focus more about the UN system, okay? In the case of United Nations system and tourism, okay, tourism as a goal, tourism as a topic, we have and we see the presence of various international organizations belonging to the UN, okay, belonging to the UN that incorporate tourism into some of their programs or activities, okay? For example, the first one, normally known as UNESCO, which is the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, okay, the UNESCO, you say, okay, educational, scientific, cultural, that's not tourism. No, but yes. Some of the programs, of course, are connected with tourism. Tourism is part of it, which, especially in the area of culture, okay, for example, some programs like World Heritage and Cultural Roots programs, even the Man and the Biosphere or the Geoparks, okay, that are part of the scientific sector, are interconnected with the tourism. If I don't protect the geopark with some rules, some aspects, and some indications, of course, tourists could be go through it and maybe in the middle of a protected area, historical area, or declare, for example, international heritage or human heritage area, we just demolish everything and creates a new hotel. So also it's not just promotion, it's also preservation and prevention. Okay, that is very important because promoting conservation, preservation, even dissemination, people to let know about this topic, about these places, okay, that is important to protect, that is part of our humanity history, and that's, of course, one of the goals, one of the areas of the UNESCO. So connected with tourism in some of the parts. It's not all UNESCO about tourism, but some of the activities, programs, and programs, and activities, programs. Another concept that I don't remember is connected with policies, with tourism. Okay, activities, programs, and policies are connected with tourism. The second one that I give you here is not direct mandate, it's not the only mandate or the main mandate, but of course it's an important one, is the UNDP. The UNDP is the United Nations Development Program, okay, which through its rural development programs, all the UNDP is not about rural, it's not about rural areas, but some of their activities, yes, are focused on that. So in that cases, incorporate tourism as a tool for the economic development of rural communities, as well as the promotion of sustainable tourism to build resilience in communities to the impacts of climate change. For example, all that tendencies to promote rural tourism, okay, to go to a town, a village, to understand, I don't know, how is the life of a farmer, okay, how is to live in the countryside, to connect with the calm, with the disconnection, not only the classical tourism of going to big cities. So that is, of course, part of this rural development because it's going to imply new profits, movement, people, and also sustainable tourism. Okay, no need to be wild, to produce some kind of destruction of the rural areas, but also to be able to visibilize them. Okay, so that's quite connected, and of course climate change, okay, the impact of the global warming, of the different topic that's put in risk the situation of environment, that is so important, so connected to rural development, agriculture, etc. Another area, another agency or a UN organization is the United Nations Environment Program. As I was mentioning, environment and tourism are so connected, not only in positive, in both areas, okay? It could be positive or negative. Tourism could be a factor that in both ways, okay? Could be great for sustainable, okay? For promotions, but also it could be a negative factor, okay? It could be impact in, for example, in Machu Picchu, okay, or in some of the volcanoes in Canary Islands, okay, the tourism could impact negatively. So important the regulations, so important the awareness, people to be aware how to don't change the environment, don't impact these special areas, historical ones, natural ones. So sustainable tourism programs, okay? Tourism don't be wild, don't be without limits, okay? Don't impact in a negative way, be sustainable. Also, to minimize the environmental impacts of tourism and to maximize the social, cultural, and economic benefits. Of course, a lot of these communities receive or should receive benefits and new mechanisms to develop their conditions according to this tourism. Other situation is when we have big companies or big structures that take advantage of the situation, the context, and actually the communities and are connected to the tourism, are dealing with the tourists daily in a good and bad way, but they don't receive any part of the benefits. So this also is part of this United Nations approach. And of course, we have a direct mandate. Okay, is the organization focused on this topic? Okay, so we have one that is tourism is the mandate. Okay, is the main aspect. The World Tourism Organization or the UNWTO, this is the organization with direct responsibility for tourism. Okay, so they focus on this. Is that much important this topic that is actually we have a United Nations organization or agency focus on that. Okay, and as there you have was created in 1975. Okay, and it was actually the successor to the International Union of Official Travel Organization. Again, when we go to previous times, tourism was so connected with traveling. Okay, right now it's not just travel is like an umbrella, a bigger scope. It's not only tourism. Tourism is part of it, and tourism implies other aspects that other travels don't. Okay, so it's not just transportation or just traveling. Incorporates new aspects to this topic. And especially in 2003, the World Tourism Organization became part of the UN system, and because of that, in this case, we have in the name UN and World Tourism Organization. As being part of the United Nations system, of course, has interconnected and interorganized programs, activities, projects, policies with the previous ones. Okay, for example, you say, okay, if it's, for example, if it's UNESCO covered the cultural tourism, World Tourism Organization doesn't care about the cultural tourism. No, they should, okay, later we can critique if it's that efficient or not, but it should be coordinated and have an interagency work, okay, and labor connected between the programs of the UNESCO and the UNWTO. Okay, that should be. Now let's see some of the objectives. Okay, and why is important the goals, the objectives? Because of course uh, show us the orientation, okay, the motivation, the area of developing, the way they conceive or they understand the organization, they understand the tourism. Okay, it's not just a business, as we already know. It's also incorporating, it's also recognizing this view as tourism as a right. Okay, so promoting sustainable tourism is one of the first is the first objective. Okay, this promotion is connected to encouraging sustainable tourism from an economic, social, and environmental perspective, and of course, environment and of course, supporting activities and initiatives that reduce the impact of tourism. It's not new, the speech or the idea that tourism affects, impacts negatively in the environment, in the cities, in the different places that it's developed. Okay, in beaches or in the Caribbean, for example, there are different regions, Southeast Asia, etc. Why is negative? Because the way it's developing is so focused in business, is focused in profits, is focused in another aspect about this topic. But if we incorporate this view, the promotion of sustainable tourism is going to support, is going to reduce, is going to handle these negative impacts. Another aspect that is important, developing policies and strategies, okay? Providing technical support, promoting international standards with rules and regulations, and generating tourism strategies, okay? Tourism strategies, again, connected with being inclusive, being for everybody, and also being sustainable, okay? That's very important. Promoting accessible tourism. Okay, this includes a lot of aspects because should be. Of course, sometimes it's not that easy, but we should have possibilities and options for everybody because everybody has the right. So it's important to ensure that tourism is accessible to all people, including people with disabilities, elderly people, and also vulnerable groups, even people with not a lot of money or people with different capacities. So it's important, or different abilities, it's important to have options for them. Okay, that's another important aspect that tourism should be, and not necessarily it should be more expensive to be able to create that. Okay, it's part of the paradigm. Fostering peace, as I mentioned before, fostering peace and international understanding. Okay, right now we still see a lot of conflicts, a lot of about religion, about ideology, about limits, border limits, about politics or different aspects, about economy. Okay, we see wars, conflicts, tensions. Okay, so this, when we consider understanding, and understanding is intercultural, is going to be reduced, is going to be easier, let's go that way, easier to go to the negotiation table, to go to arrive to common spaces, to get some understanding points. Okay, so that is very important, essentially, when we incorporate that not only in the population, also in the diplomatic agents, and of course in the governments. Okay, so understanding and respect for different cultures and promoting cultural diplomacy and cooperation. Remember, if we incorporate, that's actually we are in a crisis of international cooperation, it's going to be much better for the world itself and for the especially the international community and global governance. And the last one is the improvement, the competitiveness, okay, and the quality of tourism. Another aspect very important that we are actually seeing right now, that the concept of, okay, the concept that is tourism is massive, is for everybody or almost everybody, that includes, okay, so if everyone can be like low cost airlines or bad accommodation places, hostels or different options are so connected with this idea, which is bad quality tourism. So if it's a right, the impact in the quality also impacts in the right. So promoting innovation and quality in global tourism global tourism offerings, as well as promoting training, professionalization in the tourism sector. Okay, the experience shouldn't be lower just to be cheaper. Okay, we need to reconsider some aspects and reset some aspects to this concept of international and tourism as a right. Okay, I don't know if we have a comment, a doubt. I think we have a hand, maybe. Antonella?
Yes, let's go with Abdul Kadar.
Hello? I'm not listening anything.
Can you unmute yourself, Abdul Kadar? I'm asking you to unmute. If not, we can go with Suntum.
Well, good afternoon in my country. Are you here?
Yes, good afternoon.
At first, I would like only to thank you for your dynamic to explain this theme, this important theme in global world. The tourism is a very important, like you say, it promotes the economic situation, the social, intercultural. But for my viewpoints, I think it's very important to talk about the different type of the tourism. It's very important to people who don't know that areas. For other hand, I would like to say the impact of the negative impact the tourism in the area of the health. You know, the tourism facilitate the movement of the people around the world. But when is the agents of the health can't prepare very well to prevent some disease, like the sexual infection disease, is a danger in the area of the tourism. It's very important to take in consideration in that area for my viewpoint. Thank you very much for
Thank you. Thank you very much for your comment. Indeed, absolutely what you mentioned. Okay. We are not focusing on especially specifically the sector and the offer of tourism, but of course, it's important that consider that we have a lot of offer, a lot of options of tourism, and some of them now in the next slide we are going to cover, which is the wild tourism, the tourism that produces danger over the environment, over the people, over the nature. Okay, so how impacts in the communities and even that the economic growth or the economic profits are not actually on balance or equilibrium with the damage and with the costs in terms of the community. So it's important that one right is the right of to tourism is not above the right to live in the city or the right to live in a good condition. So it's important to put in balance, sorry, on balance, these to interconnect and to make operate in a in a proper and effective way all these rights. Okay, so of course I'm presenting mainly the right to tourism, but this is not above other rights. So we need to interconnect the human rights, and all of them are at the same level of importance. Very good, thank you. I don't know if we have any other intervention or comment.
Sorry, I never knew. You were- Hello,
Hello, yes,
good morning, sir.
good morning.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. I have a question, not a comment.
Okay, go
Let
ahead.
me go directly to my question. Okay, by considering recent global crises, for examples, pandemics and climate change, how should the United Nations adapt its tourism policies to safeguard both human rights and economic interests in affected regions?
Excellent, Ismail. Thank you. Of course, remember I mentioned some minutes ago we are in a global governance crisis. It's not about only about economic crisis, political crisis. Actually, indeed, the model of international organizations and the model of especially as the main representative of that the global governance system, which is the United Nations, but also other international organizations that are not part of the United Nations, are in crisis. A huge question, a huge criticism about efficient capacity to deal with the global challenges, and of course how to actually merge efficiently the right to tourism and at the same time pandemic situation, at the same time global challenges, at the same time wars, at the same time developing countries, developed countries, gravitation, tensions of influence, okay, competitiveness and rivalry, and of course economic as a only and main center of the point. So it's very hard indeed. So the paradigm that I'm presenting doesn't mean this is international policy or international politics, which is we are covering part of the law, part of the legal aspect, but doesn't mean that is exactly right now this is happening. This exists, but a lot of countries are not observing it, are not taking into account these positions. That could be okay, how to change, how to get the better the situation, how to reset and reconfigure the tourism. But of course we have a lot of challenges, a lot of complicated situation and hard complex uh, um, situation over the topic. And of course UN is actually one of the big critiques, not being able right now to handle in a proper way, to put on balance the aspects of benefits, the impact over the community, the wild tourism, and at the same time considering the right to tourism. How many people is not having that rest, is not having paid vacations, is not enjoying the tourism as a right, as a part of our way to live. Okay, so of course this exists, has a lot of decades, but we don't consider every day. Okay, so it's important to bear into mind this exists and how to incorporate this for our, for example, local community, for our national law or national topics to take into account, to consider, and of course in an international view. Okay, thank you. And of course it's such a topic the lack of capacity to interconnect and merge this topic in an efficient way by the United Nations. Indeed.
You're welcome. Thank you. I'm grateful.
Thank you for your question. Okay, considering the time, let's try to finish the slide, okay? And please, if we have more comments or questions, we cover when I finish the next slide, okay? Thank you. Let's see the perspective of tourism because I think some of your question could be connected to that, which is the negative impacts and the consequences. This is not only, okay, great, good, wonderful. No. Lucky it is, unluckily, no, unfortunately, it is not. Of course, the right to tourism, access to tourism, unregulated predatory wild tourism, we have that. Sustainable tourism. So clearly the most commercial and industrial view of tourism has focus on economic benefits. But when it is massive, because tourism for masses should be actually okay, if more people are enjoying or are part of tourism, are able to be tourists, is guaranteeing the right, but at the same time was connected to, okay, more people consuming, more people, sorry, more benefits. So how to put that on balance? This leads directly, that's mentioned before in the previous comments, a clash of rights, okay, between tourism and the right to the city, the right to live in proper conditions, in good conditions, okay, and some other aspects. So this is how tourism has impacts such as overloading of infrastructure. All of us are surely aware of it. Urban or even natural areas are overwhelmed by the massive presence of tourists, impacting the local population as a result of transportation, public water, or electricity service in a lower or less effective way of cover these services. Garbage collection, health services, even the showdown are shut down, overwhelmed, are unable to respond, unable to handle. Okay, for example, a town that in summer is 85,000 people, and the rest of the year is just 10,000 people. So, of course, if we are not all prepared, we are going to have problem with electricity, with water, with even to just walk because it's going to be so crowded. So it's important to consider and reconsider how to handle this without affecting the rights, but without also affecting other rights, that the rights of the locals. Okay, so increase of the cost of living, that's also happening because of the negative aspects of tourism. The mechanism of profit seeking and speculation, of course, leads to excessive increases in the prices of goods. Okay, for example, living in Madrid, living in Paris, living in New York, double, triple, a lot of times the prices of renting, for example, is so complicated to pay for it, so unaffordable. Why so expensive? Because the impacts of tourism, okay? So increases in the price of goods, services, the housing aim at tourism. And the tourists are going to use that houses. So making them unaffordable for locals, of course, push them, pressure them to move away, to leave the cities. Okay, and when I say cities, I refer to a lot of places. Okay, so the outskirts, the other towns and less touristic places tend to be more common or as a option to be, and of course to need to travel to go to your job, I don't know, 1 hour 2 hours per day, just because you cannot be close because it's very expensive, is an impact in the quality of life. The famous gentrification, okay, especially in terms of accommodation prices, it encourages a reconfiguration of available housing, prices, and services. Okay, the local food, maybe the local food is not appealing for the tourists, so the places and the stores and the markets with local food start to close, and we start to have more, okay, international food that impacts in our culture, in our habits. Okay, the leads of the uprooting of communities as areas lose their cultural and social identity and became standardized, okay, in the tourist model. That's so connected to the other concept, which is the loss of cultural identity. That's also by some authors called Disneyfication, okay? All like a theme park at a Disney World. So all set, all prepared, all well organized, but standardized, okay? Where the customs, the traditions, the cultural authenticity is of the place is completely erased or changed due to tourism. Environmental degradation, of course, very important. We see in Africa, we see in a lot of areas like Latin America, the impact of our parks, our forests, the jungle, how that impact the savanna, okay, the different, even of course the animals, the fauna, the flora, okay, how this impacts the massive tourism, okay, the depletion of natural resources, and of course the direct consequences connected to the negative impacts. It's been different reactions. For example, on one hand, we have the UN promotes sustainable tourism. Great, sustainable tourism is going to reduce these negative impacts, but this idea of eradicate and a balance in a track was already overcome, was already covered, already put aside by economic and social benefits, especially economic benefits. Okay, so the population increasingly tired and directly affected by these impacts is turning into what is called anti-tourism movements. Okay, this is not new. I'm going to present some cases. For example, Barcelona in Spain, a lot of tourism, and that is impacted in the living in the city. So we have some protests. One of them is tourists go home. A lot of protesters, a lot of situation, discontent people has been channeled into political platforms. Okay, some parties are incorporating tourism and new measures and policies to prevent massive tourism. Even we see some hate speech against tourists, which actually are not just the guilty people, is the structure, the system of tourism, okay? And of course, some vandalism by certain protesters. So it's important to handle both aspects and, of course, always avoid any kind of measure of force or violence. In Venice, for example, with significant environmental and cultural deterioration. Actually, the people from Venice, literally the locals, are not living in Venice anymore. And significant environmental and cultural deterioration led to the implementation of restriction on access to the city, some sort of quota to enter the city, 100 people per day, 200 people per day, not more. And of course, even some fines or some fees. Okay, if you want to stay in Venice, you have to pay extra as a tourist fee. Okay, so just to prevent, just to create in other areas, for example, Venice Mestre, which is on the other side of Venice, out of Venice, new hotels to reduce the impacts and the amount, the lot of tourists that they are there, okay? And of course, limitation on tourist cruises, for example, or no permissions to create or to build new hotels in Venice. Similar in Amsterdam, with policies to regulate tourist housing rentals, okay, temporary rents or vacation rents, like Airbnb, and dispersal of tourists to other less crowded areas to campaigns to promote other cities, not just Amsterdam, okay? And the reduction of tourist saturation in the historic center, okay? Less cars, no that many excursions or guided tours, etc. in some places. This shows the way we need to put on balance, okay, to coordinate these aspects. It's not only good, tourism is not just great and it is, okay, we need to change it, and we need, of course, to handle, to maintain the right, recognize the right, but at the same time to control or to reduce the negative impacts. And of course, to deal or to handle the consequences, because a lot of people are suffering tourism, okay, and that is very important. Of course, this is a huge topic. So if any of you is interested in incorporating or go deeper in the topic, I always recommend some bibliography, okay? So you can go deeper, know more about it, and to incorporate more this perspective. And of course, thank you for your attention and your time. If you, Antonella, if we have any question, comments, or anything, please let me know.
Yes, we can answer two more questions since we run out of time already. Let's go with Balamusa and Janet, and then we can go. So let's go first with Balamus.